Hi, welcome to the video Spring Data JPA custom repository example with me, Nam Haming from Hibernate. In this video, you will learn how to code a custom repository class without implementing the CRUD or repository or JPA repository interface defined by Spring Data JPA. In other words, how to create custom repository without using the entity and ID pair. We need to create custom repository if extending CRUD or repository or JPA repository does not work. For example, create custom repository when you need to manipulate data in multiple tables in a single repository. And in the next few minutes, I'll show you how to code a Spring Data JPA custom repository in a Java project that is using Spring Boot with Spring Data JPA and Hibernate framework, Spring Web, and Maven. And I'm using Java Development Kit, OpenJDK, Spring Tool Suite IDE, and MySQL Database Server. You see, this is a Java Maven project for a Spring Boot application. And this is a Maven project file. I'm using the dependencies for Spring Boot Starter Data JPA, Spring Boot Starter Web, and MySQL Connector Java, which is a JDBC driver for using MySQL Database. Very simple. And this is a Spring application configuration file. You see, I define the data source information and some properties for Spring JPA. You see here. And in this project, I have some entity classes, the product entity class that maps to the products table in the database. And I have the product repository interface that extends the JPA repository interface. And the customer entity class that maps to the customer table in the database. And the customer repository interface that extends the JPA repository interface. And also I have the order entity class that maps to the orders table in the database. And this is the order repository interface that extends the JPA repository interface. Okay, and now I need to implement a REST API endpoint /API/statistic that return statistic information. This is a statistic class. You see, it defines to refuse product count, customer count, and order count. That means I will need to query three tables: products, customers, and orders, in order to get the total number of product, total numbers of customer, and total numbers of order. To do so, I need to create a custom repository. Okay, and let's write code. So I create a new Java class and name the class as statistics repository. Statistic repository. Note that it is a class, not an interface, and I can use the repository annotation here to indicate that this is a repository, Spring Data JPA repository. And you see, this is a custom repository class, so I don't have to use the entity ID pair like this. You see. Okay, let me close as a classes. Okay, and I implement a method here: public statistic get statistic. And in this customer repository, in order to work with the database, I need to use an entity manager object. So I declare an entity manager object using the entity manager interface provided by Spring Data JPA. entity manager, and we need to use the persistence context annotation. So Spring Framework will inject an instance of the entity manager object into this repository class. Okay, and in the method get statistic, now we need to run some select query to select the total numbers of product, customer, and order to create the statistics object. Okay, so I create a new query, entity manager, create query, and I use JPQL like this. Select count p.id from product p, and it returns the query object. Okay, and then I execute the query and get a single result. Because this is a select count query, it returns a number, and I cast the object return object to a long variable. A long, this should be product count. Okay, similarly, for select count the numbers of customer. Okay, so the query should be select count c.id from customer alias c, customer c, and assign the return value to a new variable, customer count. And the last query for counting the numbers of order. So the query is select count o.id from order o, and assign the return single result number to a new variable order count. You see, then I create a new statistic object, statistic, return statistic, and I set the values of product count, customer and count, and order count. Statistic set product count, statistic set customer count, statistic set order count. So you see, this is an example of creating a customer Spring Data JPA or repository. You see, in this customer repository, you need to have an entity manager using the persistent context annotation, and in the method you can create a query object and execute the query. So you see, it involves in querying multiple tables, product, customer, and order. Note that I use JPQL, not SQL in the query. Okay, so far so good. And then we create a new Java class for the service layer of statistic service. I use the service annotation. Okay, and in this class I authorize a customer repository, private statistic repository report, and implement the business method statistic get statistic and return repo get statistic. So this is the code for the service layer, and then update the code in the controller layer, the API endpoint here. So I need to authorize private statistic service, statistic service, and in the method here I just return statistic service get statistic. That's it. And we are done the coding. Now let's start this Spring Boot application to test the API endpoint slash API slash statistic. We used a customer repository, as you can see here. Okay, you see the application has started successfully. You see Tomcat started on port 8080. Now to test the API endpoint, I use curl program in command line. Okay, so open a new command prompt and I type curl. The URL is localhost 8080 slash API slash statistic. And you see it returns JSON response block count for customer count 3 order count 2. Let me check in the database in MySQL Workbench here. Okay, so let me select rows from the products table. You see we have 4 products, and in the customers table we have 3 customers, and in the others table we have 2 others. You see the information is exact breakout for customer count 3 and order count 2. So that's how to code a custom Spring Data JPA repository. You see the code example here. Okay, so that you have learned how to code a Spring Data JPA custom repository. I hope you found this video helpful. Please subscribe to my channel, like, comment, and share this video. Thanks for watching.